Yeah, hello, welcome to everybody to the Resistance Now tour station in Vienna. We are here in the Radio Kulturhaus. Thank you so much for having us here. I am Milo, the artistic director of the Wiener Festival and member of the Freie Republik of Vienna. And I have some incredible guests with us. I start with you, Dóra. I will just introduce a bit. Dóra Büki is a dramaturg and theater producer from Hungary. She worked with the theater Kretakör, sorry for misspellings, and at the Barca Theater, and created in 2009 the Proton Theater Group together with Cornel Mondruszko. Their last production, Parallax, a play about anti-Semitism, queer life, and the rise of radical right-wing parties in Hungary, was produced at the Vienna Festival and is nominated for the Nestroy Award, and I think it will get it. Then I have Matej Drlička, music producer. Music producer, curator, musician, and former director of the Slovak National Theatre. He's a trained clarinetist, worked with all kinds of European orchestras, too many to name them, and founded in 2005 the Viva Music Festival, the Slovakia's largest music festival. He was general director of the Slovak National Theatre, the largest cultural institution in Slovakia from January 21 to November 22, and again since May 23 to August 24, when he was dismissed by the Slovak culture minister, and that's why we knew each other. And on the very left, on the very left from my point of view, on the very right, on your point of view, Srećko Horvat, philosopher, activist, co-founder of the pan-European movement DiEM25, the Progressive International, and the Island School of Social Autonomy. His texts were published in Der Spiegel, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, New York Times, and he wrote the books with the most beautiful titles I know: Poetry from the Future, The Radicality of Love, and After the Apocalypse. We will talk about these books too. For the upcoming Vienna Festival, he will curate the line of discussions, Revolutionary Love. Let me give some information before we start the discussion. Today's discussion is part of the Resistance Now tour, a series of exchanges of artists, activists, and cultural managers about the topic of how to resist to the ongoing rise of right-wing politics in Europe. The tour started in late August with an open letter in support of you, Matej, and since already landed in Stockholm, in Amsterdam, in Antwerp, in Belgrade, in New York, in Taipei, in Taiwan, and yesterday in Liège. Today is the start of the autumn tour here in the Funkhaus or in the Radio Kulturhaus. Later we will go to the Funkhaus, the former state radio station, funnily opened in 1938 by the Nazis and closed some months ago by the radio station, by the ORF itself. And since then slowly occupied by the Free Republic of Vienna, which will transform it in May 25 to the headquarters of the Republic of Love for the duration of the next Vienna Festival. The Resistance Now tour will tomorrow continue in Prague, then in Zurich, in Bratislava, in Mosul, in Strasbourg, and some other cities, always with the aim to understand and connect the different national or local situations of the arts in today's times of neoliberal budget cuts and right-wing nationalistic politics. What is the situation of the arts in the respective countries today? How can solidarity and resistance work today? And what is the role of art, of artists, social movements, of festivals, of art institutions in this fundamental cultural and political shift we are witnessing all over Europe, all over the planet? Today is the day of the presidential elections in the US, as you might know. We just had, by the way, and some council members are here, the first autumn session of the Council of the Free Republic to discuss exactly these questions and to try to start to implement the so-called Vienna Declaration that we finished last festival into the festival in the next 4 years. And this is the first public discussion we organize here in these houses. We will discuss around 1 hour for the four of us. Then we will invite you, the public, to ask questions to our guests or make statements. The talk is streamed, so please use the microphone and please consider that all what you say will stay forever on internet. I don't think I can scare anybody on 24 with this, but I tried. We will discuss in 3 rounds. I have to check my watch. About the past is the first round, what happened until today, why we are here, the 4 of us. The second round is about the now, so about strategies of resistance. And the third round is what the future of liberal values or leftist values or civil society and global and diverse art can be or will it stop to exist completely. After every round, I asked yesterday, I have to confess, quite late, Dóra, Matej and Srećko to bring their personal text of resistance and love, may it be a manifesto, a poem, a letter, or a theoretical text. And after every round, they will read out their text, and I will read out mine in the very end. Let's come to the first round, and I think I have to start with you, Matej, because it all started with you. And I think many of the public here don't know what really happened to you in August. And actually, you lost your position as general director of the National Theatre in Slovakia. You were dismissed by the cultural minister. Why and how did this happen? How did you see it coming, or did it just happen out of the blue? What is the situation, and what happened?
First of all, thank you for everything you are doing. I think it's extremely important. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for writing the letter. As I said, I didn't realize that I was the snowflake that started this avalanche.
We wrote a petition for you,
yes,
signed by 2,500 people. I think some of them, perhaps you can raise your hands, also signed it in this hall. Very nice, yes.
Thank you so much. As I said, I think it's very important what you are doing. And okay, I will tell you my story. I don't want to go into too much detail, but yes, I saw it coming. It was very obvious since we learned the name of our new Ministry of Culture, Madame Šimkovičová. She's a well-known figure of the media scene. She was a TV presenter, fired from the private TV for her expressions towards immigrants. Then she was running her own online television where she was inviting guests speaking about chemtrails and Jewish conspiracy and other conspiracy theories. She became very popular in this field, and basically this conspiracy television or online project got her into the parliament and got her to be a Minister of Culture. So when we learned that Šimkovičová was the new Minister of Culture, we knew that dark times were coming for the culture. And it actually is quite worse than what we thought. So then it's important to say that the Slovak National Theatre, especially since the 89th, the year of the Velvet Revolution, was a very important institution in terms of freedom of speech. It was a kind of a symbol of freedom for the people of Slovakia. And it was always a pain for the politicians. Always a force that they have to live with, but not with this government. This government was very quick. They put down not only me as general director of the Slovak National Theatre, but the day or 2 days later also Alexandra Kusa, the general director of the Slovak National Gallery, partly because she stood for me. She wrote a Facebook status questioning this decision of dismissing, so she went away immediately afterwards. Since then, there were many other directors of state institutions. Amongst others, I will just maybe name the Slovak National Museum. So the 3 most important state cultural institutions have now new directors.
And where do these directors come from? Who are they?
Well, after my dismissal, there was almost 1 month nobody to replace me, which showed the state of preparation, the state of mind of this new Ministry of Culture. So they put down the head of the most important cultural institution of the country, and they have nobody to replace. Now there is a lady that worked in the same television as our minister before. They share the past and the color of hair, and then. They also put another person to run the Slovak National Gallery, which it was really a funny figure. Immediately, a lot of jokes were running about this guy who, one of the first sentences that he said to his employees that he knows nothing about culture. So that was the guy to drive the Slovak National Gallery. Now he's the new general director of the National Museum, for whatever is the reason. And so the three most important institutions are now being directed or run by nominees of the party.
I remember when we met in Amsterdam last time, I think it was in the middle of September somehow. It was still, I think it was still a vacancy, your job at that time.
Could be, or
just arrived. And there you said that they just destroy, but there is no plan. But now, after some time, you see a plan behind it?
Well, officially, we don't know what is their strategy. We see that they are destroying the entire infrastructure of the Slovak culture sector. It's very important to understand that we are a young country, a fragile country with a very fragile culture infrastructure. For example, the funds that finance independent culture, or the funds that finance the film sector, and also the institutions are fragile from inside. We are not. Our institutions don't have hundreds of years of other European institutions, so everything is sort of, still shaky. We are still trying to find our DNA and try to find our position in the European framework. And as it's fragile, it's very easy to destroy. So to put it shortly, I don't think they have a plan. I think their plan is to destroy. Their activities are equal to their mental state, which is shown by absolutely no results, no positive results in the sector of culture since 1 year. There is just a lot of smoke and fire behind them.
Just now, for the sake of the anecdote, how did this dismissal happen?
My dismissal?
Yeah.
Well, I was in my bathrobe, if that is what you mean. Yeah, it was the last day of my sick leave, and early in the morning the doorbell rang, so I opened in my bathrobe because it was early in the morning and I was on my sick day, and there was a lady with two big boys behind her giving me the dismissal decree. So I said that I will not take the dismissal this way. This is not a way to dismiss a general director of a theater, but I said I understand that I'm done.
And this became a metaphor.
Yes, then when there were the protests, there were a lot of people in bathrobes on the square. So IKEA was very happy with selling more bathrobes than usually.
Before I come to you, Dóra, I will jump to Srećko. So, Srećko, you are a philosopher and writer and one of the co-founders of DiEM25 and Progressive International, as I said. And recently you created, for me, I always was thinking of the landless movement from Brazil, a kind of independent social and education experiment, a kind of postmodern commune, the island school of social autonomy. These are, even if they try to influence the classical parliamentary system, independent movements, as far as I understand. And as the term autonomy says, also on an explicit level, theoretically and very practically. So can you tell us a bit about your motivations to create these movements? Was it an answer on a certain disillusion concerning the European project, and perhaps also the politics of Croatia specifically, but from a leftist and from a civil society perspective? So what was your motivation to go in that direction? Because you were, as far as I understand, a philosopher and writer and before.
I still am, to a certain degree. But first of all, also I'm very glad to be back to Vienna. Last time I was here was in actually quite some while ago, 2020, when I encountered a saying which is contributed to both Karl Kraus and Gustav Mahler, which says, when the world ends, I'll go to Vienna, because here everything happens 10 years later.
So you have still 10 years.
Unfortunately, that wasn't true. I was here in 2020 working at the Burgtheater, and I was stuck in Vienna during the Corona times. So now when I came back after the apocalypse, everything became even more clear than it was before. And I'm slowly coming to a response to your question. Because the experience of COVID-19, if you want just one of the recent experiences we went through, was a planetary experience. It covered the whole planet. In the same way, climate crisis affects the whole planet. A few days ago, it was floods in Valencia. A few years ago, it was in Bangladesh. The next day, it will be maybe in Vienna. Who knows? It's something which covers the whole world. In the same way, war today is not something which is constrained either to Ukraine, to Gaza, or to Sudan, or to name any other place in the world, it's already a global planetary war with most of the countries or power centers involved. The same goes for fascism. Fascists or postmodern fascists, however you would call them, are very well connected, from the Melonis to the Salvinis, from the Orbans to the Trumps to Steve Bannon and the others. And they cooperate among each other. The latest installment or example of this was the outsourcing of the migration crisis from Italy to Albania, for instance, when the Prime Minister Meloni made a deal with the government of Albania to build a concentration camp for 30,000, 40,000 migrants, which will be in Albania. So you can see these are just some of the examples which show that the crisis we are facing today is a planetary crisis. And I'm not saying global crisis because it's not just a crisis of politics, of economy, of society. It's a crisis of the planet itself. It affects non-human beings as well, from animals to plants, from the geosystem, from the ecosystem, and so on. And in that context, what is missing today, and what was missing and is still missing, that was the origin of DiEM25, which I founded together with Yanis Varoufakis, the former finance minister of Greece, but also the
member of the council.
And member of the council of the Free Republic of Vienna.
Forget about that.
And Milo will do this PR marketing stuff, so I don't have to do it.
Yeah, this is kind of negative PR in this.
And I think the same reason was why we founded the Progressive International a few years later, which still exists, and it has grown to a really global movement. If capitalists, and I'm simplifying it a bit, and fascists are already internationalists, so they don't have problems to work together, although their mantra is we are against the Serbs or the Croats or whatever, and so on, but they cooperate together. You can see it also on the European level, in the European Union, and so on. And if the capitalists also cooperate together, regardless of borders, then I think what is missing today, that was the main reason for founding DiEM, was that we wanted to create a pan-European movement. We even wanted to create a movement where you could vote for someone in Germany, and for instance, me and Yanis were running as candidates for the European Parliament in Germany.
And Slavoj Žižek was one of the co-founders too.
Yeah, he as well, although we differ a bit when it comes to some geopolitical questions, but we're still good friends.
Which is interesting, because Yanis, of course, is a politician. You are a political scientist, activist, but Slavoj is just a philosopher. So
we had various people and so on, but I'm at the moment, I have to say for the record, I'm not part of the coordinating collective anymore, because I'm more focused on the Island School of Social Autonomy on Vis, which we can speak about later. But to come back to your point, I think I come from ex-Yugoslavia. I was born in a country which was called Yugoslavia. Today, I'm a Croatian with an EU passport, and we had the experience of the dissolution of a state which was for several decades quite successful in the cohabitation of people who had different religious background and so on.
Languages.
And, Sarajevo was the most multicultural city in Europe, even before the term multiculturalism was invented. And we had this experience already, what it means when it falls apart and when everyone goes back to their national identity. And what I think is missing today is precisely a spirit, but not just spirit, but organization of internationalism, which existed throughout history. We could go back to the Spanish brigades, to the international brigades, but I would, of course, go back to the non-aligned movement, which was founded, one of the co-founders was Yugoslavia in 1961, after Bandung in 1955, Nehru, Nasser, and Tito, and in 1961, Yugoslavia was the only country in Europe which was in between the two blocks, the Soviet bloc, the US bloc, which succeeded to gather movements from the global south in a struggle of emancipation, which wasn't just a struggle of emancipation, but it was also economic cooperation. So, for instance, Yugoslav engineers were working in Algiers, in other places in Africa. They were coming to Yugoslavia and so on. And the non-aligned movement today, unfortunately, still exists on paper, although I think the main ideas of this movement are something which we have to cherish and reinvent today. For instance, peaceful coexistence, non-interference in other countries, nuclear disarmament, and so on. So these are all the ideas which I think are more relevant than ever when a nuclear war could break out at any moment. And at this moment, this is not a topic at all compared, for instance, to the anti-nuclear movement which existed in this country, in Germany, in France, after 1968 until the 80s and so on. And then, of course, the German Greens comes and that's another story. But you had then, of course, with the dissolution of Yugoslavia, the bloody war and so on, also the non-aligned movement kind of lost its role and importance, although, of course, it was part of the UN, it was very influential and so on. And then I think in 1999 with Seattle, with a huge protest in Seattle, and then in 2001 with Porto Alegre, with the founding of the World Social Forum, you had, which was the main slogan of the World Social Forum, another world is possible. And you had, you know, from Noam Chomsky, Naomi Klein, Lula, who was the president of Brazil. I went to Dakar, to Senegal, where Lula was greeted, you know, as a new sort of messiah, although it was sponsored by Petrobras.
This was somehow the second movement you co-created, Progressive International, which is including the whole planet.
Yeah, but that started later, and there is a big difference from the World Social Forum. I think since I went to several World Social Forums, to Senegal, to Tunisia, and other places, yeah, it was one of the most important, I would say, forums. I say forum from the 2000s until 2010 or something like that, where you had 40, 50,000 activists, landless farmers, movements gathering at one place all around the global south mainly. But I think the biggest problem was its horizontality. And don't get me wrong, I'm someone who is fully for horizontality, but besides the horizontality, the problem was, of course, also that it was mainly a forum. I remember the discussions we had. I was part also of this main board of the international board of the World Social Forum, which was deciding where the next forum would happen and so on, where there was a debate when Tahrir happened. I remember it clearly. There was a long debate whether the World Social Forum can even send a letter of support to the people of Egypt. And they didn't do it in the end because they said, we are a forum, we don't have the legitimacy to do it.
Yeah.
Unlike that, the Progressive International writes letters, petitions. It sends, we just had a few days ago a delegation to the West Bank, a few weeks ago to Rojava. We are very present in the global south and in countries which are not even in the spectrum of imagination of Western white Europeans. And the idea is actually to build a much stronger organization and network of progressive organizations around the world. And I think this is something, when I hear your story from Slovakia, we will hear your story from Hungary, many other countries in Europe are going in that direction. The US elections are going in that direction, in a direction of something which Tariq Ali, for instance, called the extreme center. So it's a center, but it's already extreme, and it kind of invites...
It moved slowly to the right wing.
Yes, and it kind of integrates the far right into kind of legitimate discourse.
Let's perhaps come to the international perspective a little bit later, because I want to refocus Europe for a moment, together with Dóra. Because I think the four of us, we somehow represent a geopolitical room or chamber or whatever on this planet, which is quite similar and influences one country the other. So we met the last time in the Wiener Festival, where you showed Parallax, and you lost your subsidies in Hungary, I think, shortly before or sometime before. You will tell us. And we were very happy to help and to produce the play here in Vienna and to have the premiere. And now, you mentioned it, Srećko, you come to Vienna just some days after Orban met Kickl, so somebody else from Hungary came here, the leader of Austria's Freedom Party, to publish the so-called Vienna Declaration, so finally the same name like our declaration. And in this paper they demand peace, but meaning peace with Russia, and the dissolution of the European Union and the end of the so-called gender craziness in education. So for us in Austria, of course Slovakia, but also Hungary, is a kind of negative prophecy, because they called themselves the positive axis in this paper, in the meaning that we can see what will happen to Austria and perhaps to other countries in the center and in the west of Europe by analyzing what happens in your country or what already happened in Hungary. So on the one side, you are with your company, you are super successful internationally. You are touring to wherever. You just produced a play in Berlin. So the question would be, if this export is so strong from Hungary, why were your subsidies cut? And are, in your opinion, these subsidies cuts linked to the politics of the cultural politics of Orban, or is there no link at all?
Actually, we exist since 2009, which is still the same regime. So we exist throughout the same regime. And the subsidies during these 15 years were getting less and less during the years. And I believe this is a strategy to leave everyone bleed out, but on long term. And at the end, you don't demonstrate anymore because you don't have any energy to say anything. At this point,
the subsidies isn't just to understand you would write papers every 3 years and then you get subsidies, and how does it?
No,
work?
It's every year. It's
every year.
And in our
for the Wiener Festival.
In our budget, it was never more than 30%. It was in between 10 and 30% each year. The rest, the 70 till 90%, we earned by touring abroad from the beginning. And we actually used the money we earned abroad by touring to play at home in Hungary, which is a bit like we are non-profit, a non-profit cultural institution, not an institution, but company, but work in a for-profit way.
Yeah.
This way. It is in Hungary nothing to be proud of what we are doing. In Hungary we don't exist. Nobody talks about us. It doesn't matter which side. Culture already disappeared from the media more or less. So cultural news is rather boulevard news. And what there were directors who are more successful, like Cornél Mundruczó, or like Viktor Bodor, Árpád Schilling. And Árpád Schilling also left the country for France. Viktor Bodor is working a lot in Germany. People who are qualified for positions in theaters, they are not there anymore. People who are there doing very small projects. And between those people who still stayed in the independent scene in Hungary doing very small projects, they divide very small money. But they still get some money, so everyone is silent. In 2019,
in the hope of getting money again.
Yeah, and also just if you it looks like during a year that there is a statement, or you receive a letter that there will be a possibility to apply. And then you wait 2 months, and there is the possibility, and then you write for 2 months. But it's for the same year. So you don't apply in 2024 for 2025, you apply in 2024 to 2024 for the same year. So there is.
So you have to kind of to invest to before you get the money to invest.
Yeah, and you have the news in January, February that there will be a possibility to apply to. And in March, April, there is coming out the application. And then you have 2 months to write the application. And then in 2 months they decide. So it's actually a program for the whole year. And you receive your subsidies around August, September, or something like that. And during this time, you don't demonstrate or you don't say anything because you are afraid.
You are waiting, yeah.
You are waiting, and you are afraid if you say something, then you will be cut.
You will not get it. But as I understand now, this is a kind of just a neoliberal way how it works. But again, do you see I'm insisting a little bit, I'm sorry, because I project on it, and I think there must be kind of a plan, because you do this with people like you and Árpád Schilling and like the big names. You really want to bleed it out, because it makes no sense, no? Even in a neoliberal way, you would invest in these kind of groups.
But So the independent scene during these years got smaller and smaller. In 2019, we had a revolution, and there were international theaters and festivals supporting this Hungarian revolution. But after then, COVID came, and everything got more and more difficult, and we had the inflation, and even more and more difficult. And now there is no more power in the independent scene to do another revolution. With us, it's actually we were cut out by ours. So you are. If you are not with the government, I mean, in our country, if you are not with the government, you are against the government. So, I mean, independent art or art itself is always against it, and we have no other choice as being on the against side. But this support in Hungary for independent companies in Budapest, because Budapest has an independent major. The money is given by the state, but the decision is made by independent theater critics and managers. And these are ours. And they decided that we shouldn't get money.
Yeah. Because they have to decide for somebody because there is not enough in that.
They think there is not enough money, and that we are stronger than, for example, a smaller company with 2 or 3 people and without set and technical equipment and so on. But we were not the only one they decided against. But they forgot that if they want to refer on someone, they won't have anyone to refer on, because they cannot refer on the small companies.
They are still growing.
Yes, let's see that they made another project in a gymnasium. I mean, that's also needed. There's no problem with it.
But I mean, that's the classical strategy that you construct one basin, you throw everybody in it, and there is not enough money, and then just from all sides people die. So let's say the neoliberal. We will come later a bit to the political side of this. But I asked you yesterday to bring to end this first round a little text about resistance, and to read it out. So what did you bring to us?
We worked together for 15 years, but know each other. Some of us know each other for 20 years, and we work on a long run. Like we produce a new theater project during a year, and we run the performances or keep them on the repertoire often for 100 shows. And texts from our performances are used between us in discussions. So we often quote texts in discussions. And at the Wiener Festwochen at Parallax, for example, we had a rehearsal. It was shortly before the premiere, and it was like, okay, we have to do it. And everyone was a bit nervous, and some technicians in Halle didn't get that the rehearsal is starting, and they were talking in the background, and Corne said, guys, stop it. And this is actually a quote from Hard to be a God. And I was up with the technicians, and I answered him that, guys, stop it, this situation is not okay for me, because this is the Hard to be a God quote. And immediately all of us were in another mood, because everyone got that it was a deliberating secret code we use. And what I brought the text is actually from E.M. Kötzi, Disgrace. It's for the hopeless situations. We don't quote the whole part. I brought just some snippet. Words. Usually. It's how humiliating, such high hopes, and to end like this. Yes, I agree, it's humiliating. But perhaps it's a good point to start from again. Perhaps that's what we must learn to accept, to start at ground level with nothing, no cards, no weapons, no property, no rights, no dignity, like a dog. Yes, like a dog. That's it.
That's a goodbye to the past, I hope. So we come to the second round, the round of resistance and of present strategies. I want to start with you again, Matej. When we met last time in Amsterdam, I remember it during the flood that destroyed Bratislava and a little bit Vienna too. So I remember it because everybody in Amsterdam was asking ourselves, but how is it in Vienna? How is it in Bratislava? It was the 15th of September, 7 weeks ago exactly. And I remember that you were announcing a big cultural strike when we were there in the middle of September. And I was asking myself, what was the outcome of this strike? How was the influence of the strike and the other demonstrations and petitions and the whole movement on the politics of Fico and his cultural minister or his whole government? Did things change? Did you move forward or more backward? Or what happened in the last 7 weeks?
A few minutes ago I said that there is nothing positive that came from the Ministry of Culture, but it was a mistake. There is one positive thing, and that is the strike. The situation united the cultural sector. The unification is fragile, as I already used the word before. At this moment, there is around over 400 institutions that entered into the strike awareness. There is this open culture organization, which is a completely non-profit voluntary organizations of basically activist organization of people in the field of culture. And this open culture actually made this call for a cultural strike. There is a website where people from the culture can register. You just see the map. You can check it out. It's kulturnystrike.sk. culturestrike.sk, and you see the map of Slovakia and you see the institutions that are engaged in the strike. So there are a few thousands of individuals and a few hundreds of institutions that entered. It's anonymous because people are afraid. That's the main emotion in the cultural field now is the fright. People are afraid. And of course, what they are afraid of is the cut of money. The censure is now mutated to auto-censure. So the ministry doesn't have to say you do this or you don't do this. Basically, they just threaten of cutting the money, and the institutions, they know very well what they can do and what they cannot do. And it's very interesting. So, okay, on one side, the positive thing is that there is a feeling of unity. We all know that we are in trouble, that with this Ministry of Culture, basically with this government that is letting the Minister of Culture do what she is doing, that we are in trouble. If there will be just the standard elections in 3 years, for 3 years, it's a long time for things to get worse. We do a lot of smaller activities. We inform the public. We do press conferences as Cultural Strike or Open Culture. So we try to inform the public, first of all, of the importance of free art and also of the things that the ministry is doing to the arts and to the culture. We also speak during the performances. We also speak to people in galleries or in other institutions so that they understand the size of the problem. I will come to it later in my text, in my homework that you gave to me. So things are happening, but it's important to understand that a real strike in culture is not the same as real strike in a factory that produces cars. Because if, especially Slovakia, which is like the biggest producer of cars per capita in Europe,
after the downfall of Volkswagen.
Yes, okay, so thank you. But even still, if like 2 factories producing cars say we will go to strike, then the Prime Minister has a problem. Mm-hmm. If the theaters in Slovakia say that they will do a strike, the Prime Minister is laughing. He's having a laugh of his life because don't perform. Fantastic.
Yeah, I was
such
once,
a punishment.
I was once, a good friend of me is the culture minister in Belgium, or in Flanders. They sit together on a round table, and every morning they would discuss all topics. It starts with economy, and then, I don't know, education, and they go on. And the last seat is culture, and he said it never came to him.
And that's Belgium.
Yes.
Slovakia is another story, but it's the same. Basically, it's the same. So the culture strike, it's an expression for networking. We get together, we talk, we exchange information, we provide a lot of legal aid, legal help for those who are getting fired, because there is a lot of people getting fired from the institutions. I mean, a lot. Basically 10% in each institution, which is covered by the savings that we have to do as a country. So that's the positive side of the thing. The negative side is the auto-censorship that I pronounced before.
I guess the same in Hungary.
Before I came to the theater, I was doing business. When I was dismissed, I went back to business. So basically, I'm very autonomous. I can talk, and that's why I'm here, and I'm very happy to talk very openly, because I have nothing to be afraid of. But I have colleagues who spend their lives in their institutions, who they know nothing else than being an administrative figure in a public state culture institutions, and they're afraid. If you tell them to put down the head and you can stay, well, they just put down the head because
they want to stay.
Because they just want to stay. And so we don't have the support, we don't feel the support of the unions in the institutions, because unions, their main job is to keep the employment, to protect the employees, but nobody thinks of the audience. Who will protect the audience from this?
I have one more question, perhaps going on the international level, because the reason why we published this petition or this open letter to Prime Minister Fico at that time, in the end of August, was because nobody was publishing a letter like this outside Slovakia. Yes. And what is the situation now from the support from international organizations towards the National Theatre, for example?
Well, after the loud wave of support, which was you started, then there was a lot of support from Opera Europe organization, which unites all the opera and ballet theaters. A lot of media attention from Europe, but the wave just went down, and there are new waves. Political, life brings new challenges every day, and the culture issues of Slovakia, give me a break. Nobody cares anymore. No. The funny thing, and why I said that it's very important what you do, is that if Europe thinks that the cultural issues in Slovakia is nothing to be worried about, well, they are wrong.
Because, and all is connected.
Because all is connected, as you said. And the totalitarian regimes, Slovakia is going backwards in terms of economy, but also in terms of politics. We go back to non-democratic regimes. And I can't really say that we are not a democratic country as of now, but we see clear signals that tell us that we are going backwards to before 89th. And as every totalitarian regime, they always start with academia and with arts. So it's on. The fire is on. There is clearly very strong messages being sent to the cultural sector. If you speak, no more money.
And that's it.
Yes. The education, they are luckier. They have a Minister of Culture, which is rather liberal, and he keeps this sector protected. Question for how long? So, the world doesn't look in our direction anymore. Europe is not looking in our direction. I think they should look in our direction, because as it's already lost in Hungary, it's being lost in Slovakia. And I don't think that Europe should necessarily act to help us, but at least should study what's happening in Slovakia and should definitely prevent this from happening in other countries. And I think, as you write and speak very often, I think we should also unite not only in one country to create a strong opposition of this basically regime of cutting the freedom of speech and cutting the freedom of theaters, but this should become an international topic.
As you said, I think Hungary is a bit further on this path of disappearance of let's say, an internationally valuable cultural scene or avant-garde theater scene, and you are touring a lot and you are very known in Europe. So since your subsidies were cut, or also in the last, let's say, 10 years, especially since COVID. How did you live the support or the collaboration from other European countries or festivals or people working together? Was there a lot of support? Could be more, or what happened?
First of all, to react to you, it was. I had the feeling that other countries in Europe are, for example, Germany, are following what is happening in Hungary on the independent scene, but I had the feeling that it's a bit like catastrophe tourism. Mm-hmm. So, it's they cannot imagine, they couldn't imagine that it will come closer. But I agree with you that it will. We produced all of our performances in international co-productions because there was not one single moment during our existence when we could get enough money from Hungary to do theater performance like we used to, which is a big set and complex technical equipment and stuff. We always worked in international co-productions, and we are often working with the same theaters and festivals, which we are very grateful for. And also we were extremely grateful for Wiener Festwochen to step in, and also for our other co-producers. It was 3.5 years of financing. Some stayed with us from the beginning. It felt often hopeless, but we managed to do it. We are now on co-production tours, now that the co-production tours are done, more or less are done, I have no idea how to continue, to be honest. On European level, I think maybe it's stupid what I say, but I think the support or the subsidies from the European Union are often given in theater for doing European co-productions or cooperations like with the Belgian director and Italian dancer and so on. And I have the feeling that people are doing projects not because they want to do that kind of art, but because that is what the money.
They need co-producers, yeah.
Yeah, they got the money for the Italian actor and the Belgian director, and I think there should be a European level on. I believe we do European art, we do Hungarian art, but totally, European art as well, and that it should be. I don't think it's so complicated to say that's worse to support, also from the European Union.
And now, very concretely, what will you do to produce your next play?
We just have to survive the winter now. When we received the news of the Nestroy Prize nomination, we had 60 euros on our account.
So I really hope you get it, and of course we will co-produce your next play. It brings me to you, Srećko, because I think then we will hear your beautiful text. But first I will go a little bit again on the meta level with you. Because a few weeks ago we were with the Resistance Now we were in Belgrade at the Büki festival, and we were protesting with some activists against the plans to open a lithium mine for Volkswagen there. So it seems already the past, but of course it's going on. I think nobody heard about this here because it's the biggest mine in Europe, but nobody talks about it. And it was paid by European money from the European Union, the opening of this mine. And a Serbian philosopher told me a joke. She said, when the Berlin Wall fell, we realized too late that it had fallen on us, the ex-Yugoslavs. But I sometimes think that it fell on all of us, on the European project in general. So perhaps to introduce that in 1989, more than a few people hoped that for a united Europe that would have been neither socialist or capitalist, but would have combined the best of both systems somehow. But what we got in the last 35 years was a kind of a unification of the old socialist and old capitalist elites, I have the impression, under the banner of neo-nationalism. So what is your perception of these 35 years? So I see a kind of strategic shift from somebody who founds a movement like TM25 to influence European politics. I think you even collaborate with parties, with different parties, to somebody who creates a school of social autonomy on a Croatian island. So it reminds me, sorry for that parallel, a little bit the shift we know from the 68 generation, from trying to change the system to trying to create a parallel autonomous system or society, so to say. And that brings me to the question to you, is the classical liberal dream, the liberal parliamentary system already too damaged by nationalists and lobbyists? And do we need to organize us in another way now? So is it over? Shouldn't we not care about subsidies or cultural ministers or whatever to really create a parallel system?
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that, but while listening to all of you, I see a certain problem, of course. I mean, I myself was part of this world, still am. So you were my guest at the Croatian National Theatre in Zagreb. I was curating for 8 years a program which was called the Philosophical Theatre. And besides Milo, we had guests like Vanessa Redgrave, MIA, Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream, Bifo, Žižek, Varoufakis, Piketty, and so on. But when the general management changed, of course, no one even talked to me. Not at all. I mean, we were feeling like 1,000 people.
That was the last guest.
I think the last one was with Gael Garcia Bernal in June, and you were just before, I think, something like that. At the end. Anyhow, no one even contacted me whether we would continue it. Now, next year, I'm continuing it in Rijeka at the National Theatre for the next 4 years, or depending on how long the new general manager, Dubravka Vrgoč, remains there in the position. But also out of that experience, I became aware, I mean, I was always aware that you cannot just depend either on the one hand on the state, which means subsidies, or on the other hand on the market, which means capitalism. So it's not either or. I think, yeah, we have to do that, use the system as much as we can to push forward progressive ideas, if you want, or radical art. But at the same time, I think more and more what is more important is to attempt, even in a modest way, but with deep thought and deep commitment, even Sisyphean commitment, parallel institutions. So where we started on a seemingly remote island, but I must say from the perspective of the island, from where I came from, Vienna is far away. From your perspective, the island is far away. I'm talking about the island of Vis, which was until the 90s more or less completely closed for tourism because it was the base of the Yugoslav National Army. It was also the place where in 1944 Tito in a cave was operating not the resistance, because what happened in Yugoslavia wasn't like what happened in France, in Austria, in Germany. It wasn't just a resistance, it was a revolution. And when I say revolution, it means that through the resistance movement, at the very beginning, they had a clear idea that they want to change the society, not just resist, but build a new society. So anyway, 10 minutes walk from Tito's cave on the island of Vis. We bought 3 hectares of land, which is around 30,000 square meters. With a ruin of an old stone house, which is like more than 100 years ago. The land, there is nothing besides pine trees, but it was covered by the most fruitful vineyards, which was then also exported to Vienna and Austro-Hungarian Empire, because that was part of it at one time. So we started from there with the name of ISA, which is an acronym which stands for Island School of Social Autonomy, but at the same time it is a play of words with the first polis which was founded in that part of the Adriatic 2,500 years ago, which was called Isa, which is not a Greek name but comes from pre-Indo-European also, so obviously there was some society there. I mean, it was the Illyrians and so on. I don't want to bore you with the history. So our main idea...
But it was called Isa.
Huh?
It was called ISA.
Yes, it was called ISA. And now it's called ISA, the Island School of Social Autonomy. And the idea is basically, I mean, it's very difficult to sum it up. I started already how to build a parallel institution in the current dystopia and how to become more and more autonomous. I think one of my personal experience definitely comes from Vienna as well. in a city like Vienna, which is, flourishing, you have arts, culture, concerts, all this kind of stuff. Suddenly, during COVID, you didn't have anything. And I'm sorry to my Viennese friends who say Vienna is very green and so on, but during COVID, I was pretty depressed walking through Vienna, which is just concrete and gray and buildings without trees. I mean, you can go to the Donau, to parks and so on, but that for me, as someone who spends most of his life now at the sea, was also quite depressing. Basically what you find out, I mean, it's a nice city and so on, don't get me wrong. And it's one of the biggest Yugoslav cities in the world after Belgrade and Zagreb, given the immigration here. But what you realize during such times of catastrophe is that what you lack is precisely autonomy. The only things which you can freely do is to go to the supermarket and buy some stuff which was produced somewhere at a place which you don't see, an animal which was killed in a slaughterhouse on a production line, and you don't even see it, you see the final product, and there is nothing else to do. And I think that was the experience of many people around the world.
During COVID.
And don't get me wrong, what we are doing on this is not an escape. I know very well a speech an Austrian guy gave at the beginning of the 30s when he said, "Es gibt keine Insel mehr." And you know who this guy was? Guess?
Was it Hayek?
Austrian guy who kind of is connected to this building. Adolf Hitler. So he said there are no islands anymore. And, although I disagree with most of the things of Hitler, he was correct in the sense that his point was when Nazism takes over Europe, there will be no islands anymore. So I'm quite aware that this.
And at what point did Hitler say this?
I think it was 31 or 33 or something like that, beginning of the 30s. There is this speech, you can find it on the internet. And I'm very well aware that, even this, if you take an island, what is an island? An island is nothing but a mountain which is covered by sea. And the mountain is actually nothing but a future island, especially when you have climate crisis. So I think this dichotomy between islands and mainlands is a false dichotomy, which also presupposes something which is a center, something which is a periphery, something where things happen, and something which is the margin. But this island, for instance, was the first urban place in the Adriatic. So I'm very well aware, and also other members of ISA, there are many of them, Mediengruppe Bitnik, Franco Berardi Bifo, even Pamela Anderson, many artists, permaculturists, builders, engineers, and so on, is that, maybe islands really don't exist anymore, because if you have climate crisis, if you have war, if you have planetary fascism, if you have, God forbid, or whoever, Allah, Krishna, whoever it is, please listen to me, a nuclear war, then there are no islands. But what we are trying to do is to build something what Ivan Ilić, a great educator, by the way, born in Vienna, origin from island of Brač, called convivial tools. So this is not just tools for survival, but, Kropotkin would call it mutual aid. Élisée Reclus would talk about cooperation. It is using the existing technology, so it'll be very simple for maybe it sounds too abstract. What we're trying to do is combine, on the one hand, traditional technology, dry stone walling, for instance, which is a method of building dry stone walls, not just in the Adriatic, but throughout the Mediterranean Sea without using cement, just stone, soil, and water. And these structures remain for thousands of years on the Adriatic islands and the coast with modern technology. So, for instance, during the last 2 years, when ISA became very active, we have done workshops on pirate radio technology, which we will also bring to Wiener Festwochen next year.
You will bring the convivial tools
especially
here,
since we are at this building, which we're really looking forward to kind of play with the building and the legacy of this building. We did workshops on 3D printing, in a way how to use 3D printing technology for helping actually the local population on the island who cannot buy, for instance, a part of their missing boat, which was produced, for instance, by Jugoplastika, one of the biggest industries in times of Yugoslavia. But of course, during the so-called transition from communism to capitalism, all industry destroyed. Yeah. You cannot buy it anywhere. Maybe you can buy it on Temu. But now what we are doing is trying to create a 3D printing knowledge on the island, Esperanto, for instance, and many other things. So I think this is not a solution to the problems we were talking about. And it's not an escape. But it's an attempt for us, for me, for many others who are coming back to the island and disseminating the knowledge to other places in the world to build autonomy. And we call it social autonomy because the term autonomy kind of sounds too close. Maybe you mentioned the Italian autonomist movement. Of course, there is an influence in that. We have Franco Berardi Bifo as a co-founder, many others, and so on. But social autonomy, because I think the aim is not to be isolated. The point is not
to be connected,
Antarctica,
all these kind of islands together. So
exactly, a kind of archipelago. I think archipelago is the best kind of term what we are trying to do.
We come in the third round to some of these convivial tools. I would love to close the second one now with your beautiful text, Srećko. I have actually no idea how you did your homework, but you will tell us.
Yeah, but you still call it beautiful, but let's see. So anyway, I mean, what we did, it's connected also to ISA, to the Island School of Social Autonomy, is that at the beginning of October we had a big, huge gathering which was under the umbrella topic to live together. And we also had an evening of solidarity with the Palestinian people. So it was an evening of arts, of poetry, and mainly through poetry we tried to talk about this topic, which is a burning topic, and I would say one of the most important struggles and atrocities, or however you want to call it, happening today. And what I have picked for today is a kind of remix of the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish, who at one point said that if I write love poems, I resist the conditions that don't allow me to write love poems. It's quite similar to something what Slavoj Žižek, my friend, said at the beginning of the 90s when he was teaching in the United States, and he was talking about Hitchcock. And then people started to attack him. How can you talk about Hitchcock while the war is happening in Yugoslavia? Why don't you talk about the war? And it's kind of similar to Mahmoud Darwish, although I think the remix, what I will read now, shows in which way revolution and love are connected, but also oppression and love. So let me try. So it's a remix of several poems by Mahmoud Darwish. Here, where the hills slope before the sunset and the chasm of time, near gardens whose shades have been cast aside, we do what prisoners do. We do what jobless do. We sow hope. The siege will persist until we teach our enemies models of our finest poetry. Under siege, life is the moment between remembrance of the first moment and forgetfulness of the last. Here, under the mountains of smoke, on the threshold of my home, time has no measure. We do what those who give up the ghost do. We forget our pain. You there, by the threshold of our door, come in and sip with us an Arabic coffee. You may even feel that you are human, just as we are. You there, by the threshold of our door, take your rockets away from our mornings. We may then feel secure and almost human. We may find time for relaxation and fine arts, like we do today. We may play cards and read our newspapers, catching up on the news of our wounded past, and we may look up our star signs in the year 2002. The camera smiles to those born under the sign of the siege. Whenever yesterday comes to me, I say to her, now's not the right time. Go and come tomorrow. A woman said to a cloud, cover my dear one, for my clothes are wet with his blood. If you are not rain, O dear one, then be a tree, fertile and verdant. Be a tree. And if not a tree, O dear one, be a stone, laden with dew. Be a stone. And if not a stone, O dear one, be the moon itself. In the dreams of she who loves you, be the moon itself. Thus a woman said to her son in his funeral. O you who are sleepless tonight, did you not tire of following the light in our story and the red blaze in our blood? Did you not tire, you who are sleepless tonight? He asks her, what kind of flower is your favorite? She says, the carnation, the black carnation. He asks her, and where will you take me with those black carnations? She says, to the abyss of life within me. She says, further, further, further. The siege will endure until the besiegers feel like the besieged, that anger is an emotion like any other. What are you doing, Father? I'm searching for my heart, which fell away that night. Do you think you'll find it there? Where else am I going to find it? I bent to the ground and picked it up piece by piece, just as the woman of the Felachin pick olives in October, one olive at a time. Where are you from, my brother? From Gaza. What did you do? I threw a grenade at Conqueror's car, but I blew myself up instead. And they arrested me and charged me with attempted suicide. You confessed, of course. Not exactly. I told them the attempted suicide didn't succeed, so they liberated me out of mercy and sentenced me to life. But you were intending to kill, not to commit suicide. It seems you don't know Gaza. Distance there is an imaginary thing. I don't understand. It seems you don't know Gaza. Where are you from? From Haifa. And what did you do? I threw a poem at the Conqueror's car, and it blew them up. And they arrested me and charged me with mass murder. She says, when are we going to meet? I say, after a year and a war. She says, when does the war end? I say, the time we meet. This is, by the way, a beautiful love poem by Mahmoud Darwish, which is about his relationship with an Israeli who later became a member of the IDF and a spy. The war will end. The leaders will shake hands. The old woman will keep waiting for her martyred son. That girl will wait for her beloved husband. And those children will wait for their heroic father. I don't know who sold our homeland, but I saw who paid the price. Peace is the sound of a dove in flight heard by two strangers standing together. Peace is the longing of two enemies to be left to themselves till they die of boredom. Peace is two lovers swimming in moonlight. Peace is the apology of the strong to the weak. Peace is the disarming of arms before beauty. Iron turns to rust when left out in the dew. Peace means a full and honest confession of what has done to the ghost of the murdered. Peace means returning to dig up the garden to plant all the crops we will plant. Peace is the anguish in the music of Andalusia, weeping from the heart of a guitar. Peace is an elegy said over a young man whose heart's been torn out open by neither bullet nor bomb, but the beauty spot of his beloved. And the final song, which I will read in full, quite short, it's titled, Think of Others. As you prepare your breakfast, think of others. Do not forget the pigeon's food. As you conduct your wars, think of others. Do not forget those who seek peace. As you pay your water bill, think of others, those who are nursed by clouds. As you return home to your home, think of others. Do not forget the people of the camps. As you sleep and count the stars, think of others, those who have nowhere to sleep. As you liberate yourself in a metaphor, think of others, those who have lost the right to speak. As you think of others far away, think of yourself. Say, if only I were a candle in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you, Srećko. So we come to a very condensed last round, the first round, the round of love. But I want to start with a little, let's say, sadder tone, because I will ask you about the situation of LGBTQ rights and movements in Hungary. Because when I saw Parallax, there is one very impressive and very long sex scene, you could say. It's a gay party with a right-wing politician taking part. And of course, this reminds me the case of, perhaps I misspell it now, Josef Szájer, who is part of or was part of the Hungary's ruling Fidesz party, who was attending a gay party in Brussels during COVID, violating lockdown rules, and somehow you kind of put this in your play. And when I saw that scene, I somehow understood why this play cannot be performed in Hungary, because it is very explicit, but also because it these questions of identity politics, LGBTQ rights, etc., became a big focus of right-wing politics in the last 10 years. So when you read the Vienna Declaration that I just mentioned in the beginning, they are talking about Russia, about the European Union, about the axis of the positive. But besides that, they also have a paragraph where they want to have only two sexes, and I quote, to stop to confuse the children with woke education. So this is also a very important topic for the right-wing movement. And I have two questions to you, and let's try to condense it. What is the situation of this community, LGBTQ community in Hungary? Because also in other places you talk about that. And what does it mean as an artist to address these topics? And why, in your opinion, these topics became so super important in the last 10 years? Because 10 years ago, right-wing movements were mainly talking about, they were mainly racists talking about migration, but it moved very much into this field and of, let's say, love in the biggest meaning or in the most direct meaning of the word. Why is it so?
I believe, but it's not from me, but it's a strategy which Slavoj Žižek also described, that you always need an enemy, and every minority is having its point or its turn. And first you have the migrants as an enemy, or then the gypsies as the enemy, and then at one point you reach the LGBTQ community. I wouldn't say it's different or special. Just to have a more Hungarian Hungary, more national Hungary, a less colorful country, which is easier to run. But to be able to run, you need the enemies.
And why did you point out on these topics? Knowing the situation, was there a need to do so, or were these the collaborators you worked with, or was it a reaction on exactly this shift that you describe?
It's actually Cornel is starting with very strong pictures, and he was as a film director, he's often seeing pictures, and one of the pictures is so that he would like to have a sex party like that. It's always this is the most current topic in Hungary, and that we always try to react on the most current. We usually We usually work about a year on a new production. We rehearse, we then stop a bit, the technical rehearsals, rehearse further, and so on. It's about a year, and during this process, the idea or the topics you would like to talk about and the things which are happening meanwhile, they got this as a whole. They come together, and it's not in case of Disgrace from Jen Kötzi, we didn't know at the beginning that it was totally like Hungary. Mm-hmm. And the most current enemies are the LGBTQ people in Hungary. That's definite.
That's the point, yes. So, Srećko, before I end with you, Matej, because all started with you, I have one very simple question to you, but perhaps you can't tell too much. I knew you first, I think, when I read your book, Radicality of Love, which is more a historical approach to the power of love as a revolutionary power. And next year you will bring, and this is already announced, you will bring a whole series of, I think, workshops, debates, symposiums called Revolutionary Love. So what is revolutionary love? And perhaps you can already give a little idea what will happen in short. Don't tell too much, but some ideas.
Yeah, I can read some more poetry if you want. No, you made a good point already that I think in the last decades, especially after 68, while during 68 and even before, the topics of love, the most intimate sphere, was something which the left traditionally was dealing with. From Friedrich Engels, his deconstruction of the family, to Alexandra Kollontai in 1917 with the October Revolution.
friend of Lenin somehow.
Yeah. But also, I mean, that's an interesting...
Lenin was not so much into love.
Yeah, Lenin, I mean, there was a really interesting discussion between Kollontai and Lenin.
Yeah, but let's not go, it's too complex.
No, it's not. It's funny. Just briefly, I mean, Lenin was opposed to everything, almost everything what Kollontai thought. Kollontai is one of the biggest feminists of the 20th century, who was also one of the first female ambassadors, a minister, and so on. And through her and her work, you had, I would say, the biggest revolution in love. And when I say love, it's a much broader definition of love, like paid housework, free kindergarten, all with the idea that women would have more freedom and that the state would take over what usually the women would do. But also when it comes to LGBT and so on, they were already putting through laws that you could marry, a man and women and women. All the kind of things which, when Stalin came to power, were erased completely. But there was already an interesting discussion between Lenin, Clara Zetkin, and Alexandra Kollontai, just to give you a sense what will be the kind of topics we will be discussing next year, not just historically, but this is important because it shows the crucial tension in revolutionary movements between love and revolution. If you watch this German movie, Das Leben der Anderen, there you have another repetition of this famous anecdote that at one evening, Lenin was at home, Maxim Gorky was playing the piano, and he started to play Beethoven's Appassionata.
Yeah, and he was completely...
And then Lenin said, of course, he said, stop immediately. When I listen to you playing that beautifully Beethoven, I have the tendency to cuddle people on their heads, while what we should do is to smash a hammer on their heads. I mean, that's literally what, according to the anecdote, Lenin said. And then he had a big discussion with Kollontai about free love, because Kollontai was making a point which brings us directly into next year and our contemporary moment. She was on a crusade against what she calls the privatization of heart. At that time, mainly from the feminist perspective, but I think today, if we speak about it, we really came to a stage, mainly thanks to big tech, which is mainly coming from Silicon Valley, that nowadays is the algorithm or the capitalist machine which tells us whom to desire, what to desire, and how to desire. And then you are in the reality of Grindr, Tinder, dating apps. You are in the reality of commodification of love, which is also connected to the overreaching narcissism, which is connected to social networks, to the representation of our avatars and digital identities and so on. So in this sense, I would say, to come back to what I said is a good point you made, we really had a reactionary backwards movement after 68. On the one hand, 68 was also responsible for the commodification of love. It was also partially, an escape, especially if you look at the communes, Kommune 1 in Germany, the communes in Austria, and so on, where they tried to reimagine and to build a kind of concrete utopia, but of course it failed because there was usually one male who would have the right to fuck everyone and so on, and they couldn't resolve the internal contradictions. But then what happened, to simplify capitalism, said, oh, you want to fuck 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, you can do it. And now we even have an app for it and so on. So it basically came over to the most intimate sphere of humans, where love now became an object of capital and of the algorithm. And what is missing among us, among progressives, however you call them, is precisely a discussion on love and on revolutionary love. Because what you can see today, you mentioned woke, you mentioned this or that, it is that it's not just the conspiracists who are taking over the field of emotions and love and so on. It is also the secret services, which did it already. I don't know if you're aware that in the 80s, it was, I think it was recently published, a CIA report about French theory. So when you say culture is not important, they don't care about culture, that's not completely true. If the CIA had people who were reading Foucault, who were reading Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, and so on. Lacan, and they were actually really impressed by them because they said it's actually good that they speak about the signifier and jouissance and all this stuff because they are not speaking about class struggle anymore.
Yes.
So in that sense, they were very interested in theory, and I think what is
the
missing...
CIA spread the French theory to stop the class fight.
Yeah, no, you could go that far. I'm not saying that, but they definitely had a certain influence. In the same way, you know, the last 20 years we talk about identity politics and not class struggle anymore. And even in feminism, it became one of the crucial topics, identity, and not class struggle. I'm not saying this at CIA conspiracy.
Perhaps in very short, how to escape from that trap, the CIA trap?
I don't know, next year we will try. But I think what we have to do is really, first of all, to take into consideration progressive historical examples in which way the state or people, democratically without the state, can govern the most intimate sphere, love, relationships, friendships, and so on, instead of leaving it to the market and to capitalism. On the other hand, what we will try to explore next year is also revolutionary love, because love and revolution are in a way very similar, or falling in love and revolution are similar, like the moment you fall into love, which doesn't exist in German Verlieben. You know, there is a fall and everything. The whole universe changes, it changes colors, you're ready to move to an island, to Hong Kong, or to even stay in Vienna during COVID because of love, I don't know. You're ready to do crazy stuff because of love, in the same way because of a revolution. So falling in love and revolution is an event, but in the same way, in love, you betray, you become unfaithful. I'm not saying you spend the evening with someone and so on, but you're not faithful to the main event, to this transformation of the world, which happened when you met someone else. In the same way, revolutions fail when they're not faithful.
When they try to stabilize the
Alexandra Kollontai, already Lenin failed, and not to mention Stalin, but Lenin opened the door for Stalin in that way. And I think there is, just to shut up after that, there is also an interesting contradiction which you can see with Che Guevara, for instance. You know, Che Guevara had speeches where he said that the revolutionary has to be a killing machine, that the revolutionary has to hate his enemy, and that should be the first thing. But then he had another speech and letters to Aleida, which were published, to his wife, which were published a few years ago, the most romantic letters you wouldn't expect from Che Guevara.
And to his children? To his children, too.
And to children.
Nice,
and where he said... in one of the speeches, not in the letters, he said the true revolutionary has to be guided by a great feeling of love. So you can see in one person you already had this contradiction, which also Lenin had. Appassionata, yes or no? And I think these are the kind of contradictions we will try to explore. But I think
together with guests from movements from all over the planet.
Yeah, we will have movements, we will have famous philosophers and all other people here. And the idea is not just to speak about history, which will be an important part of it, because I don't know how much people are aware of this, but also to come to our contemporary moment, where I think on the one hand the biggest problem is that fascism and on the other hand capitalism are completely taking over the field of libidinal economy. Not just what you said at the very beginning of the speech. You said, oh, that might sound reactionary, you're not dealing with political economy and so on, but I think the most revolutionary thing today is to speak also about the libidinal economy, about desire, about how machines and the system creates desire, tells us how to desire, and in which way it manipulates desire, and how it then creates further narcissism, alienation, individualization, and how to counteract it. That's also why we'll have social movements in Vienna.
And yeah, absolutely, another practice of life.
And I shut up, sorry.
But this we will experience next year, here, or a bit there, and we will move there after my last question to you, Matej, because I started with you and I will end with you. When I heard this beautiful quote of Che Guevara, I was remembering one quote you said, I think, in the end of our discussion in Amsterdam, middle of September. I quote, you said, we will defeat the fascists with the power of love. And we printed it on this big panel because I loved it so much. Actually, you said, we will kill the fascists with the power of love. But as an opportunist, I changed it a little bit.
Thank you.
And made it more softer. And since then, sometimes I ask myself, and I would also ask to Che Guevara if he would be here, but I ask you now, what does this mean? What kind of power is into love to kill or defeat the fascists that are actually killing people? So will there be another gentle revolution, another velvet revolution coming? Or what is the meaning of this sentence? It was a mystery to me. Of course, I have my interpretation, but you know.
First of all, you're welcome for the copywriting of the poster. I think Che Guevara said about, smashing the enemy because that's what his voters wanted to hear. He just wanted to motivate. I think he didn't really believe that aggressivity wasn't. The real him was maybe in the letters, where he wouldn't think that would be published one day. So maybe if we should take one idea from Che Guevara, maybe it's the hidden one. And what you just quoted was I was provoked by a question from a person from the public, and the person was asking. He was asking me like, "Don't you think we are too soft with them? Like, shouldn't we as artists or culture sector be harder with the politicians?" And I said, I don't think we should be aggressive. I think we should remain gentle and let's beat them or defeat them with love. Well, we open many extremely difficult subjects, and you opened it completely. Like you exploded.
Yes, Srećko,
you
can experience this guy there for hours next year.
When I try to understand why our minister, after opening her mouth and saying something completely stupid, she has 50,000 likes on that stupid idea, I try to think like, are these because usually there is an aggression hidden behind what she's saying. Exactly, minorities. They need minorities to create an enemy. By the way, probably a new minority in Slovakia will be the theaters. That's the new enemy because the other parts of culture, the galleries, they're silent. Ballet is silent. Theater is a problem. That would be a good minority. They say that theaters drain money from the system because the highways, they don't drain money.
And the army.
In a country of corruption like Slovakia, there is no money drained through the highways.
It's only the theaters there.
Only the theaters they drain. I just wanted to come back on this idea of minorities, that soon there might be a new one. Well, the art is not, according to our minister, sorry to come back to her, I'm probably partly in love with her, is that she said like, she fired me because I was political activist, that's what she said, and she said people go to theater because they want to have fun and they want to amuse themselves. Well, maybe Slovakia will be a country where people will go to theaters only to have fun and to amuse, but even if we show the truth in the theater, or if we show the mask by cheap fun, it's still gentle. It's our language, the language of art is still gentle. There is, even if you look at a painting or at a theater that has some aggression, it has never anything to compare with the reality, with the real aggression, with the real fear that you can live during a war. So I think, as actors of the cultural sector, we shouldn't be changing this DNA of what we are. We should remain gentle. So I didn't mean to just sell a cheap quote of let's kill them with love because it sounds hippie, so it's cool. I think it's true. I
but I just understood it in a way of radical gentleness.
I know.
In front of a table
and it was absolutely
like
spontaneous. And I think this is something that we should continue. So we should continue to do the art as we did for thousands of years, in a gentle way, trying to open the mind, the chakras, whatever. We should try to open as many heads, as many minds, as many hearts by art, even though I'm not a creator of art. But I think even more important, and again, thank you for doing this, I think we should be talking more about the importance of art, especially in a city like Vienna, because you are how do you say in French, it's gâté, spoiled. You are spoiled. You are extremely spoiled. And you can't even imagine, okay, you had it during COVID, but There were immediately a lot of alternatives, online, etc. We can't rely on the fact that everybody understands the importance of art. And I think, and when I look at these 5,000 or 50,000 likes on hatred pronounced by our minister, I think we don't explain enough. I think people don't understand the importance of culture and art. People don't even understand the difference between art and culture. They think it's the same. And they are willing to believe that theater is a minority. So I think we should be explaining the power of love, of the arts. We should be asking ourselves why we do what we do, because without understanding why we do it, we can't really explain it to the people. So, as you say, to shut up, I will just finish by saying that the theater changed me a lot, my perception of the world. I became much more aware of the power of art, because I understand. I think theater is the most powerful engine, the most powerful tool in all arts. And I think we should take care of it. We should protect its freedom. We should think why we do it, explain why we do it, and do all possible to keep it free.
I understand. It's not how you end, because you wrote the text, I think, that you always read out.
Well, you gave me a homework before I took a few hours flight.
And I guess this explains the importance of theater.
Yes, so when we were speaking about the strike, like what is the strike in Slovakia, like one of the things that artists in Slovakia do is that after the performance in theaters, not only in the Slovak National Theatre, they read a text, sort of a manifesto or whatever you call it. Every time when the show is over, the actors ask the public, like, or they tell them that now the performance is over, we would like to read something. If you would like to leave, please feel free to leave, because the show is over. But if you would like to stay, we will be happy. As far as I know, in Slovak National Theatre, 99.99% people stay and listen, and this is a text. Obviously, it was in Slovak, so I just translated it by Google Translator. So if it's not perfect,
Bell is much better.
And I made it a bit shorter. It's one page. Is it okay?
That's completely okay.
Okay.
Srećko went a bit far, but
Yeah, I know.
but he always goes far.
So when the curtain closes, the actors in our country read something like this. Dear ladies, gentlemen, dear friends, we are glad to be here with you today. It is often said that our theater is far away from your real world, that these are distant problems. However, these are also common problems. A cultural country and a cultural nation is about everyone. And do we want that or not? Artists and people in culture are now being talked about a lot. Many are being attacked. They want to evoke passions and emotions in us, but we do not allow ourselves to be provoked. We want a clear dialogue and name what is going on. The public is being deceived today, and maybe you too. Pieces of information are being ripped out in order to dishonor our work and make the public slander against us. Please, let's not fall for it. They say that theaters are full of LGBT ideology, full of anti-state elements, that theaters threaten our children, our statehood, and dishonor its leading political representatives. The fact that you came to the theater today can only mean two things. Either you no longer read the news, or you are also convinced that all this is just fabrications and lies. We don't feel like refuting them anymore. We want to continue to present ourselves with what is our own and what we have talent for, our art. Without ideology, without censorship. However, today's time required us to add a civic attitude to our art. Culture should be free, as it is guaranteed in Article 43, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution of Slovak Republic. The freedom of art is guaranteed. It should be diverse, it should be inclusive, accessible, and no other. As varied as the life stories of us, people are varied. How varied are the sources of our inspiration, and how different are our views on the world in which we live. Art uplifts. In art, you look for beauty, emotions, answers to the complex questions of our existence. When we artists lose our creative freedom, sooner or later, we all lose it. because our freedom of creation is also your freedom, and your support, your interest is our motivation and energy. But we found ourselves in a tense situation, but not in a dispute between some modern and classical culture, or national or cosmopolitan. The only thing that bothers some is that we are a theater, a place where one thinks and one questions. We should stop showing who we are and who they are. Culture is not only theaters, but all of us, because we strive to have a cultural country and a cultural nation. The management of culture should be managed with respect, with trust of the cultural community at home and abroad, with a feeling for professional dialogue, and regardless of who has and doesn't have political affiliation. As employees of Slovak National Theatre, we joined the coordinated movement of the cultural scene in Slovakia called Cultural Strike. Based on this, we declare a strike emergency. The reasons are as follows. We reject political purges, pressure on self-censorship or censorship, interference with freedom of creation, and misleading the public, discrediting employees in the cultural sector, or interrupting theatre performances. We perceive the situation in culture as serious. The state ignores and underestimates it. We want to have guaranteed conditions for free creations and its representation, ensuring the transparency of selection process, formulating clear and comprehensible steps in the department, because they affect our work and also can threaten our labor, economic, social, and cultural rights. We want to be a theater for everyone. We are with you. Be with us.
Thank you, Matej.